Good evening, everyone. I'm Cleo. Welcome to another edition of Pure Vincy. And this evening on Pure Vincy, I have the honor of interviewing someone who Sir Errol Allen referred to as a national treasure. Well, you know from Pure Vincy that I refer to him as sheer Vincy genius. I'm talking about Sean Sutherland. Actually, Alton referred to him as the pianist from paradise. Sean was a top performer at Common Entrance in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, top O-levels performer, top A-levels performer. I think Sean, if not a record, it had to be a very rare accomplishment in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In addition to that, he holds at least 5 degrees, including an MBA and a double major. Sean is the 2021 Joint Laureate of Arts and Letters for the Anthony N. Sabga Awards. He also won the MIT Wisner Prize and he was made an arts scholar. Sean has several worldwide performances under his belt. He was a finalist in some of the world's most prestigious piano competitions. And on the 10th of September 2021, Sean Sutherland from St. Vincent and the Grenadines won the annual Frederick Chopin Competition for Amateur Pianists. Sean, welcome to Pure Vincy and congratulations on everything that you have accomplished and are to accomplish.
Hi, Cleo. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. A pleasure
Sean,
to be
before
here.
we get started, I want to play you this. I'm playing you this because I want you to understand that Pure Vincy celebrates everything Vincentian once we can get our hands on it. So this interview is not because we are recognizing you in the last shower of rain. We have always on Pure Vincy here on Sweet Radio SVG been very proud of Sean Sutherland. Listen to this from a show in September of this year. That piece. Sean Sutherland on the 10th of September 2021 won the 5th annual Chopin Amateur Piano Competition. And this is from a field of 40 contestants. Sean Sutherland from St. Vincent and the Grenadines won that competition. So from all of us here at Sweet Radio SVG, we want to congratulate Sean on this amazing achievement. That is truly sheer Vincy genius. And one of the things that I am particularly proud of is that Sean was the only Caribbean contestant in that field of 40. One contestant from the Caribbean. The other thing about it that really makes me proud is that even though Sean is a citizen of Canada and has been resident in Canada for many years and therefore I am sure had the option of presenting himself as a Canadian competitor, Sean chose to fly the flag of St. Vincent and the Grenadines in that Chopin Amateur Piano Competition. That is Pure Vincy. Congratulations again, Sean. Tell us about that win and the implications of that win.
I think for me personally, it was very gratifying. It was almost surreal. And I tell people this because it's one thing to be working towards something for a very long time. And there's another thing for it to actually happen. And I could just recall the moment. So what happened is that there were 8 finalists. The judges announced, normally what they will do is 5 honorable mentions for the finalists who didn't make the top 3. And what they started off by saying is that there were 4 honorable mentions. We were like, oh, what's going on here, right? So there was that. So they did that, fine, and then they announced a tie for 3rd place. We were like, okay. So now it's down to 2 people, and it still didn't sink in as yet, right? So I'm like, okay, all right. Then they announced 2nd place. I'm like, okay, wait. What does that mean exactly? And then I was sitting towards the back, and like everyone turned around after they congratulated the 2nd place, and I was like, hi. So it was surreal. And for me, it represented a first win at a piano competition, actually. I mean, a lot of people think that yes, I'm very accomplished and I would have done this before, yes, but no, this was the first one. Um, Particularly in the Chopin competition. Chopin is a composer that I love and I have a great affinity for. So to actually win this competition in Warsaw meant a lot to me, just personally. I remember doing the competition in 2018 and I went intending to do well. And I got knocked out in the semifinals because for whatever reason, I forgot to play one of the required pieces.
Oh
Um,
my.
yeah, it was the weirdest thing. I've never had this happen before. And just on a side, what actually happened was I was playing a mixture of preludes and mazurkas. These are like short pieces for the regular, the folks who are not too familiar. So they're short pieces, four of them, and then I was playing a big piece, the ballad number four. So the way it works, I'm supposed to play two mazurkas, and for whatever reason, I had them prelude, mazurka, then the large piece. So after I did the second prelude and I was about to start the second mazurka, I felt sweat coming on. So for those of you who don't know, those of us without hair on our heads, sweat is a problem, especially if you're playing and it's going down in your eyes, etc. And you have both hands engaged. You don't want to actually, be dealing, trying to break your concentration and be wiping in the middle of a performance. So what happened was that I felt it coming on just as I was about to start the mazurka. I stopped to wipe. And I started with the ballad instead of the mazurka. And so, got off stage, no one said anything. And then I'm recapping the performance in my head. I'm like, wait, Prelude 1, fine. Mazurka 1, no problem. Prelude 2, good. And I'm like, wait, I have no recollection of playing this piece. And I've never had that. I guess it's the stress involved. I just completely forgot. And I asked a friend of mine, and he's like, yeah, you kind of forgot to play it. I'm like,
Aye.
oops. And I eliminated myself based on that simply because that piece was required in that round. And it's a 2-minute piece. I could play it in my sleep, but I forgot to play it. So having been knocked out like that unceremoniously in the last competition 3 years ago, I think I had a point to prove.
The one thing that
And
I could say about that, though, is that it was obviously not anything to do with your ability. It
yeah,
just happened to be, a
it's
stressful
just,
situation.
yes, yes. And I remember also in that competition, kind of going back to what you said, um, being okay, the only Black performer, being the only performer from the region. And I remember during that particular round, this was playing back in my head. So you're like, don't mess up because you have all these. A lot of people are not banking on you, or you're representing a lot of people. So I think back then in 2018, that was always in the back of my mind. And I, even on stage, as I was playing, and that's not a good position to be in because you're easily distracted, especially when you're playing piano. You have to focus, and you don't need these sort of voices in your head, debating these things in your as you play. So I think this competition for me, I was a lot more confident. I mean, I just went out and executed what I knew I was capable of doing, and so I was pretty pleased with the results.
I would imagine so.
Yeah, just a little bit.
You have an obvious preference for classical music, and
Yeah,
in a previous interview, one of the things you said is that the body of classical music is so vast that you could
yeah,
play for your entire lifetime and not cover all of the music that is in
yeah.
that genre. What is it that excites you about classical music?
I think for me, classical music, it's a challenge. I guess being quote unquote academic slash intellectual slash however you want to term it. I like these sort of mental challenges, and so piano music allows me to kind of feed that interest. And it's one thing where you can never, as I said, you can never run out of music. And so there are pieces that you somewhat you would eye them for years, and then you may not be able to play it right away for whatever reason. And then eventually you get around to it and you conquer it, and then you go after something else. And I think that sort of that challenge. I think the other thing too, I like instrumental music in general because it allows you to express emotions that you cannot quite codify with words. And it's a lot of mood setting and expressing things. And I think sometimes words just fail. And I think for me, classical music in particular allows me to do that quite easily.
So that sort of answers what would have been my
Sort
next
of.
question.
There are a couple other things, but yes.
But what I was going to ask you after that is, given your interest in classical music and what you have explained drives your interest in classical music, why is it that Caribbean music doesn't quite make that standard for you?
It's not that it doesn't necessarily, not necessarily that it doesn't meet the standard. I think what happens with Caribbean music is that it requires drums. It requires, for it to sound as effective, it needs bass, and you need at least a drummer in there. And then on top of that, you could play around as a pianist. If you listen to a lot of like the stuff, for example, that Frankie McIntosh does, a lot of his, yes, he does have some purely solo work, but a lot of that his work, even his solo work, it sounds fuller with the bass, and it sounds fuller with a drum. And I'm not exactly the most. I'm not an ensemble musician per se. I do it. Yes, I do enjoy when I do it, but for me, the solo repertoire does not require that. I can sit in my home and do it by myself. I'm fine. So there's that aspect. The other thing is that a lot of Caribbean music isn't written down as much. So there are some composers who have scored their pieces, and I do have some books. Granted, I should get to them a little sooner, but it takes a while. The other challenge with playing Caribbean music, and which is one of the challenges I've taken up, is that a lot of people tend to think it's a little happier and not as quote unquote serious, and it doesn't have the quote unquote depth that other classical composers, music of other classical composers has. You even find this in composers, like for example, there's a Ukrainian composer, Kapustin. His music is classical, yes, in terms of form, but he uses a lot of jazz idiom. Now I like it because while it's jazzy, you don't need the bass and you do not need the drums again to make it effective, right? But what I'm finding is that a lot of teachers that I played for don't necessarily like it, or a lot of friends who are classical musicians don't appreciate it. And you try to push them as to why exactly they don't like it, and they'll tell you also, oh, it doesn't have the emotional depth. It's that, it's the other. It's always some excuse, right? And I think what has to happen is that it requires pianists with some sort of commitment to bringing this music alive and bringing it to the audiences, because there's an audience for every type of music. And so I'm playing some Kapustin. I have done music by a Bajan composer. So I've done some things. I'm getting there. There are a lot of choices, and especially if you're doing competitions, you have to be careful of what you choose. But yeah, I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
And what do you think, in addition, well, as you say, one of the criticisms is a lack of emotional depth. And for you, one of the challenges is that it it requires more of an ensemble to bring out the richness of the music as opposed
Yeah.
to a solo performer. Do you think there are other things that we can do to perhaps even try to get Caribbean
Yeah.
music the sort of worldwide appeal that
Yeah.
classical music has?
You mean in the classical arena or just in
Just
general?
as a genre on its own, as classical
Okay.
music is accepted internationally, how can we
It,
get Caribbean music to that
right.
level?
But the interesting thing with classical music internationally, yes, while it's accepted, it's also dying, which is the interesting part. So in Europe, it's still popular because a lot of it has European origins. It's popular in Asia, very popular in Asia, particularly piano music. However, outside of that, it's pretty much dying. And if you speak to a lot of the classical performers, they are complaining and worried about its longevity. So while it's quote unquote established, it there's a battle going on there. And I would argue that some of the reggae artists are a lot more popular than the classical artists. And if you look at um, the money they make, or the size of their concerts, the sizes of the venues relative to each other, you will see that Caribbean music is actually not doing too badly.
Okay.
So it's an interesting question. It's all a matter of perception and the way you look, and from what lens you're looking at, through which lens you're looking at it. What I would say though is, I think there is a what in order to let's say get Caribbean based classical music. Let's try let's try music that has more of these sorts of quote unquote ethnic / world flavors. It takes composers who are a little bit more better trained in terms of music theory, harmony, counterpoint, and that sort of thing. Because the thing is, with a lot of Caribbean music, you can get by without a more rigorous, quote unquote, musical base, right? And until you understand that base, then you're not able to create compositions that are a little bit quote unquote, and I'm quoting it because I'm treading a very fine line here, elevated for want of a better word. And so it's a very tricky thing if you want to say, okay, I'm going to use a very dense harmonic language with the Caribbean idioms to create compositions. And that's what Frankie has done. And that's what he brings to a lot of his jazz improvisations. And you hear it. And if you compare the richness harmonically of some of this music compared to what you hear now from some of the so-called artists, you do not hear. I know I'm going to get beaten up, but say what? It is a fact. And
You have
it
to call a
could
spade
be,
a spade.
you have to call a spade a spade. And, if you look at the reasons for that, it's because in order to make music now, it's a lot easier. Somebody can go on their computer, run some beats, run some loops, blah, 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 and you have a tune. You put a catchy hook on it, you sing or not sing, and you have a tune that everyone latches on to. Now, that is good, but it also has a drawback, right? And so in order to quote unquote elevate it, we need more people who are trained as musicians, more people who have solid harmonic bases upon which they can draw in order to create music that's a little bit more quote unquote elevated. I'm just saying that because I know I'm going to get beaten up for it, but like I said,
Okay,
whatever.
so let me call off the dogs. Let me call off the troops and take you back to where where there's no conflict. One of
No,
the
no, that's
things you
fine.
said is that there's a wide range of music that you love and
Yeah,
composers that you love, but you will never play. Why is that?
yes. Because I think, again, it comes down to time. You know, as you get older, you become aware of your mortality, and you realize that, hey, I have X number of years potentially. You're working, you do other things, you have to balance your life out, you have X number of hours to dedicate to something. And so musically, what do I want to spend my time doing? So for me, I've made the decision that, hey, I'm going to play classical music because that's what I enjoy playing. Not to say I didn't enjoy my days with Suede, I didn't enjoy my days working with chorale, etc. Working with other artists, I enjoy it. But given the limited time, I would like to explore something that I'm passionate about. And I think the same goes with, so I'm doing that now, I'm exploring the piano music I love. Now, there are some composers that I played a lot as a kid that I don't play as much of now. There are some composers that I have not played a lot of that I'll eventually get to, hopefully. And there's some that it's just a toss-up, it's a decision you have to make. And that just speaks to the richness of the repertoire. And for me, I tend to think about pieces that I want to play for a pretty long time. And they have to appeal to me typically before I start learning them. I'm not going to learn something because I just want to learn it. That's not the case. So usually I pick pieces that I feel as though I have something to say in. And something that not necessarily I want to put my own stamp on it, but at least I want to express this music and bring this music to life. And I think that for me is usually criteria number one. Now, whichever composer has that, I find a lot of it in Chopin, fine. But there are other composers, for whom, yes, I play their music, but I don't play all of their music because, again, I just prefer some pieces over others.
Let us go to one of the pieces that actually made your cut. One of the pieces from Chopin that actually made Sean's cut. This is Pure Vincy on Sweet Radio SVG, and my guest this evening is the very accomplished Sean Sutherland. And in the previous segment, we were talking about his love of classical music and how he chooses his pieces. He did a little comparison and contrasting between Caribbean music and classical music. And one of the last things you spoke about, Sean, was actually putting your stamp on a piece. And this, I would like you to take a listen to. Wow. I tried to speak several times during this performance and I could not open my mouth. I was blown away. What a transformation. Just the interpretation, the presentation, simply amazing. Somebody needs to tell Rihanna that that was her very own Don't Stop the Music with a touch of sheer Vincy genius. That was Sean Sutherland. Sean, that was from a program in July of 2020. So when I tell you we keep featuring Sean Sutherland, understand that I'm not joking.
It's funny, at first I was like...
sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, you go.
No, at first I was like, wait, what is this piece? And then I'm like, well, yeah.
When I first heard it, Sean, I got goose pimples. And when I was editing it for this particular program, I'm saying, okay, but this is long. This is long. This is not a clip. This is almost the whole thing. But I didn't know where to stop and where to start because everything was just so beautiful. And it struck me in the first segment when you spoke about one of the things that you like about classical music is the ability to build emotions, because I felt the passion and I felt the emotions building, and your immersion in that song just translated itself to me, and I felt it. I kept going all the way
Thank you.
with you. What inspired that adaptation, Sean? What made you put your
Well,
stamp on that
okay,
one?
so I wasn't the person who did the transcription. It was Lola Astanova, who's how do I put it? I think she's Eastern European for sure. I can't remember which one of the countries, but she's a pianist who likes to do dazzle and spazzazzle and, wear heels, stilettos, and, up to hair and mini skirts while she plays and all that. And I saw, she did a transcription and she had a recording of it. And I was like, whoa, I like this. I really like this. And I think as a Caribbean, it's kind of, as you say, finding things that, speak to your roots and speak to you. And I thought that this did a very good job. It's demanding technically. It has a piece there. It has the tune that everyone knows. So this is something that will connect well with audiences. And so I learned it. First I ordered the music and then learned it. So it's a similar thing with, I think, the Bob Marley transcription I did. That one I did. The story behind that is there was supposed to be a piano competition in Jamaica. And one of the requirements was that we transcribe Bob Marley's One Love. And I accepted the challenge, and that was fine. I don't like composing, but arranging I have no problem with. But I've also sought out arrangements of popular music, quite a few of them that I can do more, but again, time, there's just so little time. But I think for me, it's splicing in these sorts of things, these sorts of transcriptions that people would know with pieces that they don't know and try to get. And I think that was, now I'm kind of running all over the place, but one of the things I really enjoyed about the recital I gave in St. Vincent was, Chopin, a lot of the music there was not necessarily popular Chopin even, but I felt as though the audience connected with the music. And they were there with me. I didn't have to fight too hard to bring the music across. And I think it's like introducing particularly Caribbean audiences to classical music, as well as something that they are familiar with, that may have some souped up arrangement that draws folks in. I think that sort of balance is important.
Well, I know you're being very humble here when you say you didn't have to try too hard. The audience was there with you. But Sean, I think your talent drew us in. Because a lot of us are not familiar with that type of music. It's not on our playlist. So we don't even recognize some of it. But certainly the way it was presented to us, nicely tied up with a bow and everything, we couldn't help but just fall in love. So you have to give yourself some credit.
Yeah, but it took a while. And I think that's one of the things. It took a while for me to really master that and at least be comfortable doing so. And I think even in the competition, especially in the second round, I felt that, especially after the fantasy, that yes, I nailed it. For whatever reason, I don't know what happened, but yeah, that happened. So and I think it's the one thing that keeps me going to. It's the potential to have these sorts of experiences with live audiences. Because it's one thing to do online concerts and do recordings, but it's another thing to really connect with an audience and see the joy that you bring to people as you play. That's one of the things that I really enjoy.
You spoke about transcribing One Love for Bob Marley. But if I take you a little further back in your history, Redemption Song is something that is dear to you, another Bob Marley composition. Why is that?
For me, Redemption Song is the first piece of music that I ever remember listening to in my life. I don't know why. I remember listening to it as a kid, and I remember exactly having some sort of an epiphany about being able to follow the chords and the structure and the changes in the harmony at a very young age. And so for me, that song remains pivotal. in terms of my own musical journey, I mean, and that's in addition to the lyrics of the song, what, Bob was, um, what he put into the song and what the message of the song is. In addition to all of that, there is a connection, a personal connection in terms of my own musical journey.
Understood. And currently, your passions are for adapting classical music for the steel pan and for exploring opportunities to use technology to promote learning. How is that going? What have the outcomes been up to this point?
So for me in that realm, I haven't been doing, well, I haven't been doing much work with Pan recently, and a lot of it has to do with just opportunities. I've spoken with the National Steel Orchestra. There's a new conductor. The previous conductor is no longer there, and with whom I know him. The new one, we've spoken about it, but then COVID struck. So I guess it's kind of getting these relationships going. Starlif and I have spoken off and on about working to get do that sort of collab, classical and on pan. We did a few things for one of their most recent shows in 2018, I believe it was. But outside of that, I have not done much lately. But prior to that, yes, it's transcribing concertos, and concertos are pieces written for orchestra and a solo instrument. And there are many written for piano. And if you go to a lot of the symphony halls in quote unquote first world countries, you would see a lot of the orchestral concerts featuring pianists as a soloist. So these concertos, concerti, quote unquote plural, are very popular. And so I've always, as a child, had the thought of replacing the orchestra with a steel orchestra. So I've worked with rhythmics in that regard. I've worked with the National Steel as well with that. So those
National Steel of
definitely
Trinidad and Rhythmics of St.
National
Vincent.
Steel Orchestra, Trinidad and
Yes,
Tobago. That is correct.
right.
And so I've had these experiences that's near and dear to me. Haven't done any recently because I've been, I guess, focusing a little bit more on the solo work. Still learning concertos, but I just have not played them with steel orchestras. In terms of the second part of your question, which has to do with the technology bit of it. When I was at UWI, I was hired to introduce some music technology courses there. And the goal of those were essentially to help create that foundation of engineers who have some musical background as well as are able to understand the acoustics, sound science, etc., so that they are able to have people to work in the lab to do the research, in the steel pan research, which was happening at UWI. And so my boss, Professor Copeland, Dr. Brian Copeland, who is one of the inventors of the G-Pan, he hired me to do this. So I set those up, and I've worked with students when I was at UWI, doing these sort of acoustical treatments. I let them do their thing. I guide them, and so now one of them is Dr. Randall Ali. I have to say doctor these days. I keep forgetting. He's a doctor, not me. So he's now in Leuven at KU University, for example, and he's doing acoustic research there. So a lot of them have gone on and are making their mark in the field.
You have
So
inspired,
it's really a
Sean.
part of that, yeah.
You have inspired. And we spoke about why we think Caribbean music may not have the place in the world's mind as does classical music. Do you see, though, and I'm thinking this is a separate matter, do you see classical music having influenced Caribbean music and culture in any way?
Yes, I think there, especially if you listen to some of the older calypsos, a lot of the religious music as well, a lot of that has a stronger connection with classical music, and more, and let's even say music as a basis. So if you listen to a lot of the hymns that would have been sung in the quote unquote, and we're quoting unquoting again, established churches in, Methodist, Catholic, Anglican. They tended to come from an era when people harmonized in four parts. There were, a lot of the hymns are based, written by even some of the famous classical composers. A lot of the tunes were adapted from them. There was this classical music had a very strong connection with religious music for a very long time. And a lot of the composers found work, not only in the courtyards of some of the royalties, but also in the church. And so there's always been this connection. So with a lot of the music that you would hear, particularly when I was growing up or even younger in those established churches, that is pretty much straight out of the playbook of classical music from a choral standpoint, right? And then there were the extensions, which may or may not have made it in, but at least that basis is there, right? And so if you listen to a lot of the calypsos, they had the sort of progressions that you would hear in the, similar to what you'll hear in the hymns, similar, that sort of approach where the keys followed a certain, progressions, etc. The chords followed a certain progression. And so I would say there's definitely that influence. Um, you know, Instrumentation, yes, there was a lot more big band, big, sound, which is closer to the orchestra. But of course, with our own influences coming in, and now it's veered off definitely as has a lot of the religious music as well. And so, in terms, kind of going back to the previous point, it's you can veer off and do whatever innovations you want. That's fine and good, but you need that sort of musical basis, which is agnostic to genre, right? So if you're a musician and you need to be able to, okay, know the chord structure of pieces, know how the pieces are laid out, what chords are traditionally used as versus, what can be substituted, et cetera, et cetera. And I find a lot of that is lacking.
But Sean, you mentioned a while ago that there is that tendency to veer off in recent times.
Yes.
And earlier on, you also said that classical music or the interest in classical music is actually waning.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean for the genre, one? And what does
Mm-hmm.
that mean for you?
For me, I think I am at a position now where I could play what I would like to play. And I guess I've had enough quote unquote backup careers so that I'm able to balance it. And so I do not necessarily have to be at the, you know, trying to go out on a limb too much, although I do go out on a limb, but doing things that I don't necessarily like. But what I think it means is that people have to invent themselves, reinvent themselves. A lot of it has to do, and there have been a lot of studies on this. Orchestras worldwide have been studying this phenomena as to why classical music is not as important, and a lot of it can be tied back, is not as popular, and that could be tied back to the music curriculum in schools. You have, if you think about when I can't, when we were kids, there was a lot of choral singing. There was a music festival. Now, while these, folk singing, music in schools, recorders, the whole works, right? And with that came, teachers had to be trained to teach music. There was a lot of that decades prior. Now that's no longer the case. And so what happens is that you do not have, you have a lot of societies where people are not introduced to quote unquote foundational music, which is not only classical. A lot of, if you think back, there were a lot of kids' tunes that were popular, a lot of children's music that children are not exposed to now. And while you may think, okay, it's not important, but these things help form your basic musical foundations and your ear as a musician. So if kids are used to listening to a lot of different types of music, and music that has a certain amount of structure, then they would be able to appreciate music that's a little bit more complex, quote unquote. So a lot of it really goes back to what our priorities as a society in terms of educational curricula. Should music be in there? To what level? Do we provide opportunities for musicians or people who are interested in the arts within a regular, in terms of regular schooling? There's a lot of talk about STEM, science and technology education, and math education, but there's science, technology, engineering, and math. But there's now STEAM, which is a lot of people are talking about that, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. So kind of bringing in that other aspect in there. So it's not just, I think, music is suffering, but drama, dance, also facing a similar battle. But for me, like I said, it's, I think it's imperative to, introduce music, continue to play for Caribbean audiences so that they introduce, they have encounters with the music, they understand what it is, and that there are young people for whom classical music may be their better genre, preferred genre of, just where they're better suited as a musician. We have.
I was about to say, in your mind, at least in this particular instance, to buy the genre a little bit more time, we perhaps need to re-expose our youngsters to.
Yes, definitely. And if you look at places like, for example, if you listen to what we're hearing now in dance hall, quote unquote, / reggae, in Jamaica, you're hearing a lot more sophisticated harmonies coming out, like the Tis and San type stuff. It's like there's somebody with a musical brain behind it. You can hear it. Yes. It's very clear. And that's elevating that genre, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what's going on in soca? Okay, if you listen in Trinidad, there are some artists that are doing a little bit more of that. Are we doing that, or are we still stuck doing, So I think what happens is that really having that musical understanding and harmonic base allows you to really drive things in different directions. Not just because you want to be more quote unquote classically trained, but it's just a matter of a general basis of music, and you can apply that to any genre.
This is Pure Vincy on Sweet Radio SVG. I'm speaking to Sean Sutherland, the pianist from Paradise, St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
St. Vincent, my homeland, you gave me no mansion, no gold, no diamond, yet I love you a million for the things that you have to offer. Is more than my heart's desire. Lovely beach, tropical breeze, always there within my reach. I love you, St. Vincent, me sweet little island, St. Vincent. I love you, St. Vincent, home of the blessed St. Vincent. St. Vincent, St. Vincent, I love you. Can look at the sunrise, can look at the sunset. Sweet Mother Nature, such beauty, such splendor. Can live my life without fear. Freedom to go anywhere. You got love and you got peace. From La Soufrière to the Grenadines, I love you, St. Vincent, me sweet little island, St. Vincent. I love you, St. Vincent, home of the blessed St. Vincent. St. Vincent, St. Vincent, I love you. Calypso and reggae to make me jaggy. Bamboo melody and in harmony. Night morning, Christmas and carnival. You got so much bacchanal. Wailing time is any time. And any time is wailing time. I love you, St. Vincent, me sweet little island, St. Vincent. I love you, St. Vincent, me high room, St. Vincent. St. Vincent, St. Vincent, I love you. Mango guava jelly, early morning fish tea, coconut water, farine and sabuka, pilau, crayfish and kalaloo, sauce, dumpling and maniku, roast breadfruit, blackfish ribs, and much, much more deliciousness. I love you, St. Vincent, me sweet little island, St. Vincent. I love you, St. Vincent, home of the blessed St. Vincent. St. Vincent, St. Vincent, I love you.
Sean, one of the things that I always ask my guests on Pure Vincy for is some of their favorite Vincentian music. And you gave me a few of your, well, those that are at the top of your list. And included in that list is St. Vincent, I Love You, and Our Nation is Born. Tell me why these songs mean so much to you.
I think they were iconic. Back in the day, you heard them quite a lot. The thing is they speak to, I guess, national pride. They speak to some of the beautiful things about St. Vincent, at least particularly St. Vincent, my homeland. I've heard different arrangements of it. One of my favorite is the one that Frankie McIntosh did for the New Kingston Chorale. It's absolutely beautiful, that arrangement. The whole, again, are we talking about chords and we talk about harmonies and the complexity of it. Yes, the version by Beckett is beautiful. It has, and then he has all these interesting little quirky things in the arrangement, the sounds of the birds and some atmospheric things that are going on. It's very different. It's a very magical and enchanting piece in many ways. And he did that, Frankie did that arrangement. And then he turned around and did something different, but yet beautiful. And with a whole heap of chord extensions and complex harmonies for the Kingston Chorale. And I really enjoyed that arrangement. And so I've kind of played that arrangement a couple of times as a solo version, or I played it with pianist Jomo. I think I played it with Rodney as well. And so for me, that piece, just speaks to, not necessarily patriotism, but just a love for St. Vincent, a pure, genuine love. I think the Skakes and Our Nation is Born, it's one of those things you hear as a kid, around independence, obviously. But I think it's one of those things that you don't really fully appreciate until you listen to it again as an adult. And I listened to it again recently, and I'm like, really, this is a powerful song. It's a beautiful song, clearly. And again, it speaks of our achievement as a nation, different stages, and what it means going forward, having a vision, and then you could think back to, okay, 1979, yes, Soufre erupted, and never mind, I was only 2 at the time, but you can imagine Skakes looking into the future and saying, okay, these are the things that I would imagine of a nation that we're about to, a nationhood that we're about to embark on. What should that look like? And putting that into some sort of musical composition is actually, it's genius. It's not to be overlooked, but you don't really appreciate these things unless you sit and think about it, or you're an artist and you've had experiences putting together artistic products, and you're like, it's really genius. So.
We're all moving on together. So we must plan collectively for a brighter day. No one knows what's in store for the future. True dedication can get us there. Independence is a milestone in our march to prosperity. Now St. Vincent and the Grenadines have a rare nationality. We are a nation of many races and have tried hard to integrate. The strength of so many faces shall be the prospects of our fate. So in this moment of history, tell it in every community, our nation is born. Colonialism is gone. This is a time of national freedom, so share our love with someone. The 27th dawn of October, our nation is born. One history, one ecstasy, one destiny, for all are we. take this stand as a nation. Let us not forget our past. For this future we praise our heroes who fought slavery to the last. Special honors to Marcus Garvey. His sacrifice gave us all a chance. And all the men who fought in this century to bring us this day of independence. So in this moment of history, tell it in every community, our nation is born. Colonialism is gone. Now this is a time of national freedom. So yeah, I love it, someone, the 27th dawn of October, our nation is born. One history, one ecstasy, one destiny for all of we. Though some manipulate the franchise, uphold adult suffrage, there's still hope of a bright tomorrow for all the underprivileged. Let love excel our wishes, our advancement needs plenty of work. Remember, back is that for the nation that upholds less action and lots of talk. In this moment of history, tell it in every community, our nation is born. Colonialism is gone. Now this is a time of national freedom, so share love with someone, the 27th dawn of October, our nation is born. One history, one ecstasy, one destiny for all of we. My people join hand in hand now. Put your differences aside. Get your hearts and soul together. We got to build this nation with pride. Work in harmony with good leaders. Never elect no one here to rule. Then we can feel at home like good comrades. Our people must not be election tools. So in this moment of history, tell it in every community, our nation is born. Colonialism is gone. Now this is a time of national freedom, so share our love with someone, the 27th dawn of October, our nation is born. One history, one ecstasy, one destiny for all of we.
Now, Sean, what I find is that in recent times, more so now in these perhaps last 15 years than earlier, youngsters tend to lose their focus on music at a certain point in their lives. Regardless to when they start or how accomplished they are, at some point they just drop off the wagon. What kept you focused?
For me, I spent a lot of time listening to recordings of pianists, Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Louis Williams, quote unquote, the famous, infamous Topsy. She made sure that I listened to a lot of whatever music she had on LPs that I will, rip onto cassettes and, that sort of thing. So I was listening to a lot of this, music, and I've always, that was a constant throughout my life. I always listened to music. There are baby pictures of me among my father's records. So this has been going on forever. So it's something that I love. And I think having the ability to play and create, not necessarily create my own compositions, but able to play the music for myself on the piano. I also just fell in love purely with the sound of the piano. And so for me, that love and that ability to have music be my creative outlet is something that kept me. I think the problem I had was after I really wanted to make it, a full-time career. I worked towards getting a scholarship, which would have enabled me to do so, or at least put me on the path to doing so quicker. And I didn't. I had to. I didn't accept the scholarship, and I think for me it still didn't deter me, because even though I wasn't playing piano per se, my need to express myself musically was still there. I was still in charge of, doing training choirs. I started Suede. So again, I did a lot more work in pan. So I just found other avenues in which to, work with this gift. And so for me, it's something that I never really put down. And when I got to MIT, I picked back up piano again, and this was after essentially a 3-year break. And, realizing that, hey, yeah, I really loved it. The mere fact that I picked it up again speaks to, my genuine love for it. And then I made a vow not to put it down again. And so I think just being able to really stick at it, have the opportunity to work in it, better myself, see the progress I have made over the decades, has been validating, in the sense that it's like, okay, I can do this. So as a kid, I never thought that I could play these pieces, but hey, yes, I may not have been able to play them at 20, but at 40 something, I'm playing them comfortably. And that's quite inspiring, and it keeps me motivated.
One of the things
even
I'm
to your
getting
question,
from listening to you, is that unlike with a lot of other children, you just had a natural and genuine love for music. There are a lot of children who get into music because their parents think that it is a good extracurricular activity for them. They don't necessarily have that innate interest in music.
Well, the thing is, it's funny. This is a very interesting question, because I have done research when I was at Stanford at how learning design, and it had to do around how do you design for behaviors you want, and just some basic research. There are ways to design learning experiences such that someone comes away wanting to do something even at a later stage in life. So there are many people for whom they may have been exposed to music as a kid. Whatever happened, they're separated from it, and then they come back to it with zeal at a later point in their life. And there are many commonalities when you explore the lives of these types of individuals. So what that says, if you look at these commonalities, is that if you introduce these things into a child's environment, you may not necessarily force the child to do it, but by designing these experiences, you get them to come back to music even at a later point. And I think this is where, and then some of them revolve around recordings of some particular music that is very meaningful to you. And for pianists, for whatever reason, that is Chopin. That's what, my limited research among around 100 people say. A lot of it is, having someone who believes in you and who encourages you to do it. There are some smaller factors, like, for example, having an instrument at home, but it's not necessary. That's helpful. Having an older sibling or parent who's into music helps, but does not necessarily guarantee it. So you could design experiences such that we end up with a society where more people are pursuing music in a more serious way. Now, that said, if you look at what the current situation is, you realize, or at least when I look at it, I'm like, a lot of what I know to be true from this research is not apparent in the society. So what you're seeing anecdotally that, people are not following or pursuing it is definitely the result of the environment that we create. We have created. So.
Sean, you have had a lot of experiences. You've performed in several different places. You are accomplished in several spheres. What is your dream performance? It hasn't happened yet, but...
Dream performance. I mean, I guess Carnegie Hall is everyone's, every musician's, classical musician at least, dream performance. I think for me, playing, let's see, Prokofiev's second concerto with an orchestra. That would be it. Brahms' second with concerto with an orchestra. Those would be, I would say those two.
And what would you say is perhaps among your most memorable performances to date?
Memorable performances. I would say definitely the second round of the Chopin competition. I enjoyed the very first time I played with an orchestra as a soloist, which was in Trinidad. I played a Greek concerto with the National Sinfonia Orchestra. And the thing that I particularly liked about orchestras is that, with orchestras, is that you would listen to it on a CD and you practice your part in isolation, or you practice your part with another piano, a second piano. And then all of a sudden you're in a room with these other players and you're actually hearing what you hear on the CD and you're actually playing it. And then there's that magical moment in the rehearsal where you're like, wow, this is actually happening. Another one memorable occasion was playing in Germany. That one at Gasteig, that in Munich, that was definitely memorable. There was this one time the chorale I played for the chorale. We were playing in Barbados. They were on tour in Barbados and they played at a church there. And for whatever reason, the acoustics in that place were just haunting. So I think it's really, for me, about the magic that happens on stage and being able to, just move people or even be moved. But you can't be too moved, otherwise you would not be able to play properly. But yes, I would say those are some of the more memorable ones. Yeah.
And we know you as a pianist, but most great musicians play multiple instruments. Do you play any other instruments?
Not currently. So I did try to learn to play the violin at some point, gave up because I'm like, this will take too much effort. So I'll put the effort on the piano. And also I play a bit of pan, especially having been around it a lot. But I don't practice. So
you're loyal to your piano?
I am loyal to my piano. I don't even play organ. I'm sorry, no. Like, the thing is with the organ technique is different, and I love it. I will sit down and listen to other people play it. I'm just not. And I'm fine with that. A lot of people expect me to compose music because I'm a musician, and they get very upset. For example, I remember Jerry George being very upset with me because he wanted me to do music for some jingle, and I'm like, no. I don't do that. And I understand what I like, what I'm good at, and that's what I do. Like, for example, again, one of my friends, two of my dear friends, a friend of mine who's a dancer here, wanted music. He's been harassing me to do music for one of his dance pieces, and he got a commission with the National Ballet to choreograph some work for them. And I was asking me to compose. I'm like, no, that is not me. I have another friend, a Haitian Canadian composer, David Bonton, who that's his thing. He plays piano, but he is a composer. That's his shizzle, and he will do a fine job of this, much better job than I would.
So in short, there are horses for courses, and you are happy that you have found your course.
Precisely. And that's it. And it's hard for people to understand that, but I think it simplifies life. For me, at least.
Okay. And what are you up to currently, Sean?
Okay, so right now I am preparing for the Van Cliburn Amateur, which was my first amateur competition in a very long time. The last one was in 2016. I got to the semifinals there. And this time, we have to do much better. And it was supposed to be last year, but of course, COVID. So it's scheduled for next year, actually, October. And so right now I'm having a little battle about what repertoire I'm playing. I had my choices before, but I'm kind of having some second thoughts on that. So I'm learning some new music or relearning some music for that. So that's thing number one. Number two, just continuing my own development. I'm preparing a new program of Chopin piano music because I figure as the Chopin amateur winner, I ought to have a Chopin recital to go at any point. So I'm learning some music for that. And the other thing I'm working on is just some personal development, some technical work as well. So those are the things that I'm working on. I'm slowly getting, speaking to folks about engagements, but I'm just trying to be very careful not to, get too busy too quickly.
That's what I thought you were going to say, that you're trying to get to not overwhelm yourself. But Sean,
yes.
You are as accomplished in music as you are in academics.
Yes.
5 degrees. Most recently, the Chopin Amateur Competition. All of this takes a lot of work. How do you balance all of this stuff?
I think for me, once I set my mind to something, I typically, which is good and bad, I typically just work through it. I make a plan. It involves a lot of sacrifices. So, for example, a lot of this summer, for instance, there was things, we had been on lockdown for about over a year. Here in Canada, we didn't have some of the luxuries that folks in St. Vincent had. But so we were on lockdown for a very long time. And then there was the weather that, even though you may have been, allowed to go outside, you weren't going outside. So the summer rolled around and, there are friends who wanted to meet up, or even if it's, socially distanced outside somewhere. But I had to practice for the Chopin Amateur. So it's this sort of making hard decisions around, balancing, okay, what do I want to achieve? No, this is what I want to achieve. This is what it takes. So bite the bullet. In terms of the degrees, what I learned in my last degree is that I love learning. And sometimes what you want to learn about changes as you get older. And when I look back, it was always about, I want to learn about this. And so you go launch into a degree to learn about it. The MBA was that, okay, I wanted to learn about finance because that was a weak area. So I went to do that. The latest degree is I had my own business, doing a lot of private tutoring, specifically around test preparation, SATs, GMAT, all those sort of standardized tests. And I got tired of repeating myself. So I'm like, okay, I need to learn how to create online courses. And that took me back to educational school in terms of education design. So it's always about, for me, learning in some sense. So I think that's, and again, like I explained earlier, the thing I like about classical music is you keep learning new pieces and you can't run out. So it's that same sort of always wanting to make time for learning that. Right.
So your accomplishments are simply put powered by the quest for knowledge.
Yes, it's not about. I mean, it has never really been about. Well, let's say when I was younger, perhaps it was about, okay, I want to get the best CXC results or the best A levels. I think those were smaller goals at the time, but I think now it's about, okay, and to your point, or to further add some more color to that, I think part of the reason why I don't have a PhD, because it was never about, I want this for status. because there are quite a few people, not ragging them, but they know who they are, some friends of mine. That's okay. We all love, we all love each other. But
I hear knives being sharpened.
No, but there are a lot of people for whom doing a PhD it's a thing because it comes with a certain amount of status, etc. And I don't have one. And I think part of the reason is because it was never about that for me. And for the first time, I actually thought about doing a PhD was when I was in my last degree, because I was like, oh, I actually like education design. I like learning. I like designing learning experiences. Wow, this is something that maybe I should go study some more. But there's also piano. I like piano, so maybe I should spend some more time, doing so. So that's a little bit of a toss-up. But yeah, it's always been about learning.
And Sean, with all that you have under your belt, and the fact that it is just driven by the need for knowledge, can you therefore define your destination?
No. In other words, do I know what I want to do when I grow up? No. And that's basically what my question is, right? And no, and I think this is one of the things that folks need to realize, and especially younger folks and those who are charged with advising younger folks, is that you really do not know what you want. And some people do. Don't get me wrong. There are some people for whom this is what I want to do, and that's the tunnel vision. But for most normal folk, that's not the case. And so I think we put a lot of pressure on kids to know what they want to be when they grow up. And that's good and bad, because sometimes you force people to make a decision without seeing a lot more options. And then for some people, they basically put on the blinders after that and don't keep their eyes open for other things that they may not have known about, but are exposed to along the way. And so for me, I really cannot say that. I think I look at it more as there are things I may want to achieve before I pass, my time is done, but I don't think there's necessarily a destination. Maybe my destination is being happy and content. And, however that looks,
not just being happy and content, but making a mark wherever you decide to set off on the next chapter.
Yes.
And when we look at you, not having a particular destination in mind, but just following the paths that you're led along, doesn't look so bad after all.
It doesn't look so bad. No, it doesn't, but it's a little tricky at times.
Folks, this is Pure Vincy on Sweet Radio SVG, and my guest is this sheer Vincy genius, Sean Sutherland. Sean, another one of your favorite songs is Mouth in Me Mumma. How does this song reflect who you are?
I think I remember this song. Okay, so this song was very popular back in, was it 87, I believe, 1987?
88.
It's about that. I was still in prep school, and one of the things I remember about this song was, Posa is a cousin of mine on my mom's side.
Okay.
It was popular. The message of the song is, being able to speak truth. So there's that. But I think one of the other things musically was, I remember Cardo. Cardo was one of the custodians at prep school who kept some small pans in that little space between the pipe and the girls' bathroom. He had his room there, and he would have pans, and there would be a few of us who would learn to play, fool around with the pan. I learned pan there. That is true. But yeah, that was one of the songs he taught me on. So yeah, but I think for me, it's a beautiful song, and it also speaks to some of the resistance, within our society, in our history, and our wanting for better, quote unquote. and speaking out against oppression, etc., etc. So that's what I say.
So let's listen to some of that.
Thank you, baby, baby. That's all. I'm saying no, sir. I'm human after all. You think you got the plaza for each and every soul. You've been sent and Peter Bota. We can't take anymore. You don't indicate to me. Control the sun. Whatever order you give we, thy shall be done. You want to beat me, you want to treat me. Anything you tell me, I have to agree. You must be thinking of me mountain of me mama. You must be thinking me na Vincy too. You want to knock me, you want to flap me. In your bosom, confusing your sensibility. Modern colonialism wavering over we. If we damage super equipment, we should be punished, I agree. But the flogging we going to reason or prepare for mutiny. This gun shall not smite me by day. You can't smite me by night. You alone want all these days. Mind somebody out you like. You want to beat me, you want to treat me. Anything you tell me, I have to agree. You must be thinking me love me mountain of me woman. You must be thinking me love me. You want to knock me, you want to flag me, you want to accuse me, you cheat and abuse me. You must be thinking me left me mountain of me mama. You must be thinking me left me mountain of me mama. Oh yeah. You run with Teresa. You are a national head. You want the media. They bury if you say that. You're treating Vincent and people, oh yo, like they're the Israelites. We made a mistake and grumble. You turn off the sunlight. Well, the country done bad. Or Hotel California. We must be foolish and cry. Trusted it ever after. Then you go ill. Anything you tell me, oh Lord, you must be love me mountain of me over. You must be standing up in sea too. You want to knock me, flog me, ill-treat me, abuse me, knock me, flog me, ill-treat me, abuse me. You think me love me mountain of me mama. You must You must be think me left me mouth. You think me left me mouth. You think me left me mouth in a me mama. You must be think me left me mouth. You think me left me mouth. You think me left me mouth in a me mama. You must be think me left me mouth. You think me left me mouth. You think me left me mouth in there. Hey, you think me left me mouth. You think me left me mouth. You think me left me mouth in a me mama. Cause I'm me rule, Vincy Carnival, I'm me, the general, I'm me rule, Vincy Carnival, I'm me, leave me with the drum. I wanna hear the drum and the bass. I wanna hear the drum and the bass. And I wanna see some people moving now. Because here we're gonna sing. When I sing this head roll, but I don't mind. I'm going to sing it anyway, here we know. I'm me rule, Vincy Carnival, I'm me, the general, I'm me rule, Vincy Carnival, I'm me, I want to hear you singing it. Come up here, you come up. Give she some space, come up. Give she some space till she come now. Music now. Cause I'm me rule, Vincy Carnival, you see pretty woman, I'm me, the general, I'm me rule, Vincy Carnival, I'm me, Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Good night, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Greetings and love. Whoa, ho, ho, ho. Whoa, ho, ho, ho. Yes. Where there's a will, there's a way. Though the way that may seem it right unto you dismay. We were born to be free, but survive such rough history. Yet life still goes on in the battlefield. Our existence is a mystery. Coming through from the start, they learn how to beat me. Coming through from the start, they know we was strong. But I know enough is enough. But I can't be tougher than tough. We can make every single dream come true. We got to do what we got to do. We got to fight on. Get up, stop, complain. It's a universal pain. From sunrise to sunset every day is a living strain. Fight on. Never mind the sweat. You got to sweat to get. Every good seed you sow brings a fruit wherever you planted. Perseverance and strength go together. Triumph in all its reign follow after. Signs reveal it's a shortened span, and time wasted is a crime. Let us move in retaliation. It's time and clean up racial oppression. This time, make way for the upcoming generation. This time, sunshine is we who have to make things go right. Don't sit and wait on a hand. Sometimes that hand just push you down. To achieve your goals, you must go for it every morning. Where's his own crown? Conquer every obstacle you encounter. Many will be waiting to see you fall. But if you're out to find something new, you must follow every clue. So at the end of the road, when you find your treasure, prosperity to undo, we got to fight on and take full command of our future plan. Go and crack on, we back out, take we out the situation. Fight on, every family, take it seriously. It is there we create and devise the path of our journey. Determination and vision go together. All your aspirations follow after. Signs reveal it's a short no span, and time wasting is a crime. Our talents we must employ this time. Grudge and selfishness we destroy this time. A future for every boy or girl this time. Where there's no vision, the people perish. Where there is no love, we're left in despair. You wage war against your own brother, trample your sister down in your quest to make living easier. To no other you give consideration. If we're going to advance, we must come together. If we have to succeed, we have to unite. Records can be broken, robes of gold could be worn, but the strains of life will intensify unless we get up and fight. We got to fight on, take a rapid flight, work hard day and night. Is the one way to go if you hope for a future bright. Fight on honestly. Fight for you and me, for the sick and the weak and the helpless, they are the needy. Laziness and crime go together. Rougher times in the day follow after. Signs reveal it's a short no span, and time wasted is a crime. Our talents we must employ this time. Grudge and selfishness we destroy this time. A future for every boy or girl this time. Hey, 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 hey. Faith is to the heart, like a flourishing vineyard is to the community. To all those who pursue the struggle, the silver lining of the dark cloud that hovers over our freedom, our liberty, and our independence can be seen clearly now. I'm talking about honorable people. Hugh Malzack, George McIntosh, Ebenezer Theodore Joshua, and his wife Ivy, the great Sir James Mitchell, and him Eustace. Right now, the Right Honorable Ralph Gonzalez. The struggle continues. Haiti, Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, and all those countries torn apart by the wicked imposters of war and crime. Perseverance and strength go together. The struggle continues. And before I leave and wish you all the best on your 30th anniversary of independence, I want to make sure that I sing this note You observe that on Friday night, one of our youths sang this song and won the crown. It shows that our music has transcended the generations. One great achievement, as silent as it may be, needs mentioning. Congrats, my dear young Cornwall. You're doing well. We are making positive moves ahead. Continue to rise, continue to shine, continue to move forward. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, son of the soil, Razam says, I love you. Thank you. Good night. God bless. Ding, ding, ding.
You've had some tragedies and disappointments in your life. Your dad died at quite an early age. You were offered a scholarship while you were still a teenager, which you had to turn down. You were instructed to turn down. And then there was this incident in 2018 at the Chopin competition. There were little different things that affected you in your life. You didn't get to pursue the course of choice at MIT. How did you overcome those challenges?
I think it's one of these cases of like making lemonade with whatever lemons life throws you away, and it takes it's painful, especially if you're working towards something and you don't achieve it, or the things that blindside you in the case of death. I think particularly my dad's death, for me, it caused me to not be as gung-ho as I was before. I tended to try to achieve more of a balance, sometimes for good and for, good and bad. But I think really it's just more of the sort of grit where you really stick it out, regardless of what it is. And I think now being older, I have been through some of these experiences, and I know, okay, if something doesn't exactly go my way or the way I would like it to go, okay, whatever, it will hurt for now, but there will be more opportunities. And I think this is one of the lessons that you come to appreciate as you get older. Things don't always go your way, and when they do, that's fine. There's always another opportunity. Another opportunity will come. It's not the end of the world. And so it's really appreciating those lessons and really building them into, your general disposition. And so yes, things will knock you back, but as someone explained it to me, it's like you have a valley between these highs, and sometimes you can narrow the valley. The valleys will come. It's just that your life experiences allow you to narrow it so that you don't spend too much time in the dip. But I think I've learned to, as I said, just make lemonade from lemons. And I guess it's a creative thing, trying to make the best of whatever you have.
You've made some fantastic lemonade, Sean.
And And as he fell beneath the weight, he cried, "Father, not my will, and I'm the one to blame. I caused all the pain. He gave himself the day he wore my crown. He could have called us Holy Father and said, "Take me away, please take me away." He could have said, "I'm not guilty, and I'm not gonna stay. I'm not gonna pay." And I'm the one to blame. I caused all the pain. He gave himself the day he wore my crown. 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 The day he wore my
What does Christmas in St. Vincent mean to you? What are your fondest memories of Christmas in St. Vincent? Or perhaps a more sensible question is, what is it that you like most about Christmas in St. Vincent? I think
My fondest memories of Christmas in St. Vincent really revolve around food and music and, cleaning, but that's not exactly fun. Christmas in St. Vincent, you have this mix of Christmas music, which is from the regular standards, the Bing Crosby's I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas, which, we don't have in St. Vincent. The Parang, the local, music, the Sippies, the Bowmans, etc. And you have all that just mixed up and playing on the radio. Then you have the jingles, from back when I was a kid, you had, I can't remember what they were, those little, not caroling, but what do you call that thing again, where you have like these sort of rhymes you have to call in, and then of course there's the Shop at Jax's Christmas and all that craziness. Those are fond memories. The other thing, musically is a staple for me was the Kingstown Chorale's Christmas concerts. Just lovely music, lovely singing, and that year after year really set the tone for me, Christmas-wise. Like I said earlier, I'm not a fond of the cleaning, but I guess there's always the scent of the polish on the mahogany furniture after all of that. So again, that's synonymous in my mind and memories with Christmas. Towards in more recent years, it was a lot of it too was just going around and eating people's food, because in my house we weren't cooking on, and I'm saying very recently, this is, when my parents were not there, we weren't cooking, and so we'll go up to families' homes and go from one to the other, and there'll be like 3 or 4 homes lined up to go to eat, and by the second one you can't go anymore, and you're making excuses for not being able to eat. So yeah, I would say the food, the music, and chorales, concerts in particular for me are pretty much synonymous with Christmas and.
Oh, wow. I completely forgot. I know that thing that you're talking about, that rhyming thing, but I cannot remember now what it was. Was it Rhyme a Line? Oh my goodness, that took me back. Sean, you are amazing, and your account is hilarious. Thank you very, very much. I enjoyed that.
I started this song, didn't know what to tell you, but I must begin. So I say I love you when I followed my dreams. You were gifting me hope, and so you light up my day. You said you're filling my soul, complete in so many ways. It's Christmas with you. There's lots of things to do, but when you're loving me, it's a lovely day to share. When our love is in the air, it's Christmas with you. And I want you to know that life couldn't be sweeter. This day you have come into my life and captured my heart. I could wish on a star, you'd make it come true. So here's the all that you gave to my life, for the all we receive. So much love that we may believe. Oh, it's Christmas with you. There's lots of things to
I don't know how this relates to you and whether or not you've been impacted by it, but we have a lot of creatives and people who are really accomplished in what they do who don't feel appreciated or don't feel as if they're being allowed to contribute to the cultural landscape. Shakeen is known to have said that when he came back to St. Vincent and he wanted to go into the Ministry of Culture, he was told, well, you can't eat culture, so we can't spend all of this money on that particular sector. More and more people are willing to just commit themselves to being creatives. And despite that statement years ago, you can't eat culture, how do you see people being able to convert culture into a plate of food? There's a saying, I need to eat a food from what I do. How can people do that?
I think that skill is universal in the sense that if it is, you don't, let's say, for example, you don't choose to become a musician or even a creative, collectively, and you instead choose something that's safer, like, engineering or law, which, maybe there are too many lawyers around now, but doctor, engineering is on the list. There's medicine, lawyers, engineers, doctors.
And managers.
Those three. And the thing is that for a lot of them, they basically have the road laid out. There's a well-beaten path. That's what you do. And a lot of them get there and they're like, this is not what I thought it was. It's not what it's cranked up to be, at least for me. So therefore I'm lost. I'm kind of just following. Now, even those people there, yes, they might have the plate of food on the table, but they're not happy. Right? So I think there needs to be some sort of initiative in terms of entrepreneurial skills and that goes across the spectrum, empowering people to be creative in the ways that they look to put that plate on their table. And I think that's a skill that's transferable to everyone, not just the creatives who may need it more because they really have to go and create that path for them and try to figure out a way to make their passions viable in terms of making a living. But it's also true for the well-trodden career paths options as well. There are a lot of people who would spend their lives, for example, engineers who would spend their lives working at one particular company. They may have an idea for a product that may be revolutionary, but they're stuck. So to answer the question, is really about using that creativity to figure out ways to make it viable. But a lot of that requires entrepreneurial skills in their purest sense. And a lot of us are taught to just, go to school, get the subjects and find a job, right? And not look to, and that's something that is not, you can teach it, but also it has to do with your upbringing. A lot of the people who have businesses, they're children of people who have businesses and they've lived around it and they've seen it. So even though they may not necessarily, they are usually more the ones who would find a way to monetize their whatever passions they have. And then the rest of us are like, oh, how did that happen? But so it's really about that sort of education. And if we cannot depend on the households to have it, to do that, maybe it is time that we look at having these sort of courses entrenched in the curricula at some point so that we do empower people to fend for themselves, quote unquote.
So it's not just about the individual, but you think as well the educational system has something to do with
a lot about
people. Okay.
Yeah.
Sean. To thank you very much for joining me here on Pure Vincy on Sweet Radio SVG. It has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you this evening. On behalf of my audience and those of us here at Sweet Radio SVG, we want to wish you all the best for Van Cliburn 2022, and we hope that soon enough we'll be able to have you come back to St. Vincent to present your recital of Chopin.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for having me. Good night, everyone.
Before you go, tell me, what is Pure Vincy?
Pure Vincy? That's a tricky one. I think it's the embodiment of a set of ideals. You know, there's certain things about being Vincentian that are, how do I put it? That we all recognize when we see it, whether it is, and it's not just basic things like the way you speak, but it's also some of the choices you make, some of the ways you approach problems, the way you approach people, etc. So it's really just about, it's the embodiment of all these different characteristics.
Sean, thank you. Thank you ever so much.
Thanks.
This has
Really
been Pure
appreciate it.
Vincy on Sweet Radio SVG. Join us again next Saturday for another edition of Pure Vincy. Sean, best wishes.
Thank you. Thank you.